transmission of COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement for the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted with the agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment for those members of the board that have joined via Zoom. For this meeting, the Affordable Housing Trust is convening by the conference via the Zoom app posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Please note this meeting is being recorded and all attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you, and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I note otherwise. We're now going to turn to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, please permit me to cover some ground rules for effective, clear conduct of our business to ensure accurate meeting minutes. The chair will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they concluded their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members and registered participants, inviting each by name to provide any comment or questions. Please hold until your name is called. Please remember to mute your computer or your phone when you're not speaking, and remember to speak clearly. For any response, please wait for the chair to yield the floor to you. State your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in conversation with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. After the panelists or members have spoken, the chair will afford the public comment to those members of the public who have joined via Zoom. Members of the public who wish to speak must state their names and acknowledge by and speak through the chair. Thank you. And now we will move to the agenda. Sorry, I got a lot of windows open here. Looks like item number 2 is approval of the minutes from the October 20th meeting.
No, you have to approve the agenda.
Oh, thank you. Item number 1. I'm looking for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Okay, second from Christy and Penny. By roll call, Allison Mitchell,
Aye.
Dave Iverson,
Aye.
Brooke Moore,
Aye.
Rima Sherry,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
and Penny Dye.
Aye.
And Brian Sullivan, aye. Item number 3, we'll look for approval of the October 20th minutes. Does anybody have any commentary, edits, or changes?
I'll just be abstaining because I wasn't present.
Okay. Eleanor, you can.
You weren't there? Hold on.
I
Dave
came in
wasn't there.
late.
In October, I thought you were. Oh, you weren't. That's right. You hadn't arrived yet. But you were there for most of the meeting, Christy.
No, just the last agenda item.
Okay, and Dave was not there, so he'd need to abstain. Okay, thank you.
Wait, I was there, wasn't I?
Not in October.
You came for the executive session.
Oh, that's right. I was on my way out the door. Gotcha.
Did you come for the? Okay.
Executive session. So I will
Yeah.
abstain.
All right. Motion to approve the minutes of October 20th.
Second.
Okay. There's a second from Brooke. By roll, Allison Mitchell,
Aye.
Dave Iverson is abstaining, Brooke Moore,
Aye.
Rima Sherry,
Aye.
Christy's abstaining, Penny Dye,
Aye.
Brian Sullivan, aye. Item number 4, public comment. So open the floor for public comment. I see any members of the public. I see Brooke raising her hand. I'll identify Brooke.
So I'm going to speak for a moment in my role as just a human living on Nantucket, not as a member of this board. I wanted you guys to know that I'm in the process of drafting and filing a citizens warrant article requesting that 0.5% of the land banks, the 2% land bank fee, be redirected from the land bank to the Affordable Housing Trust for the purposes of creating and maintaining affordable and workforce housing in the Nantucket community. The details of this are still being ironed out. The deadline for filing the warrant article is November 13th. And I just wanted this board to have a heads up that I am working on that.
How many, what did you say, Brooke? What percentage?
One quarter of the current revenue stream, which is 1/2 of 1%.
Okay. Perfect, thanks.
Mhm.
Awesome idea, by the way. Good for
And
you.
so our next meeting would be on the 17th, so after the deadline that you'll be submitting that?
Mhm.
So, well, Rima?
And you're submitting this as a home rule petition?
Yes.
Good.
Yes. So I've already, it's been reviewed by town council, and I have had and have more meetings scheduled with people from the land bank. I've reached out to the finance department, the chair of the finance committee, and there are a group of other citizens that are working on it with me. Ann Kusp is included in that group. And Howard, I think, is probably going to be working with me as well. We've talked about it. So really, I'm just trying to figure out the legalities of it and the process. And I feel very strongly that given 10 years of effort to get the housing bank bill to no avail, that perhaps it's time as a community that we talk about the long-term place of the land bank in the community as it sits relative to the need for affordable housing and the allocation of revenue streams and prioritization of where we as a community are spending our dollars. And to me, this is really about opening up the door to a conversation as much as anything else, and to try to get us a revenue stream. And given that the housing bank, we keep getting pushback at the state level, and also direct questions from legislators and lobbyists who have opposed this, why don't we divert land bank revenue to housing? And so I just thought this was an apt way to start the conversation in the community.
Rima?
I'm happy to put my name on that. I'd love to sign for you.
Thank you.
Christy?
I just wanted to comment and say thank you to Brooke. I picked up the I&M this week for the first time in a while and saw the home prices. And last week there were 18 homes over 2 million, in which none of that we were able to get the transfer fee. Whereas if that had gone through, we would have significant funding for affordable housing. And I immediately texted Tucker how furious I was that we haven't found a way to pass this transfer bill. So kudos to Brooke for trying to look for another solution.
Penny, I saw your hand go up.
Yeah, just one of the arguments, Brooke, against something like this, it historically has been, it requires altering the enabling legislation of the land bank. So that's just one thing I want to throw. I'm not voicing an opinion one way or another. I'd also like Tucker, now might be an opportune time to bring people up to date on the proposed state tax. Statewide tax.
Sure.
Thank you.
So before giving the update on that, just with regard to a change to the enabling legislation, one of the things that the land bank has brought up before is that fact, and that, perhaps even if we send something up from Nantucket that, let's say, we all thought was a good idea, that we potentially could get something back different than what we wanted, that, you know, a legislator from Western Massachusetts could introduce something that we didn't like. But in speaking with Dylan, he basically said he has never seen that happen in his tenure, that because it's a home rule petition, in effect, he and or Julian would have the opportunity to kill something if something like that were to happen, which again, he is not personally experienced. So with regard to where the housing bank bill is, I mean, our own home rule petition is currently, I think it's in the steering committee at the House, along with roughly, I think there are 5 other transfer fee bills in the House and 1 in the Senate. There is a transfer fee coalition involving a number of communities, Boston, Concord, Somerville, et cetera, that have been working you know, very closely and in a coordinated fashion to advance these individual home rules as a block. You know, the fact that Boston is now part of the mix and wanting this, I think has given some, you know, some level of optimism. However, it's still, you know, far from across the finish line. And you know, the Mass Association of Realtors, as we all know, has, you know, vehemently opposed a new transfer fee. And even though we're sort of chipping away at it, it's still, it's unclear when it may happen. And so there is a new proposal as of last week that Dylan is working on. He had originally introduced some statewide enabling legislation, let's say modeled off of our home rule petition last summer, and ultimately got withdrawn in the fall. There just didn't seem to be the appetite on the statewide version, but he's been working further with his legislative colleagues and others, I think including leadership in the House, on something that may have a level of appeal, which is the first 0.4% raised. So it'd be statewide enabling legislation for a community to enact something along the lines of what we already are proposing. But the way that it's presently being proposed is that 0.4%, the first 0.4% would go actually to DHCD, to go into 2 buckets. One is for the RAFT program, which provides rental assistance and mortgage assistance as well, and has gotten a lot of use during this COVID period. And the second bucket, the second 50% would go into basically funds to be available for development for communities around the state. So the money, that 0.4%, doesn't necessarily stay locally. It goes elsewhere in the state. Then anything above the 0.4% would stay locally. So this is, I think, an attempt by Dylan and others to, you know, try to bring, let's say, some of the opposition on board. And DHCD, who would be the recipient and administrator of this 0.4%, has a lot of sway in the legislature, and this potentially could be an appealing thing. I have gotten a little feedback from some folks here. Joe Grouse had a really interesting suggestion from my standpoint. Dylan is looking for feedback on this bill, and or you know, potential bill, and I'll circulate it to the whole of the trust. But Joe Grouse had indicated that perhaps a system of, rather than the first 4% going to the state and then everything above that staying locally, that it be pari passu, like for the first maybe 0.5%, and or, you know, up to the 0.8%, and then anything above that would stay locally. So I thought that was an interesting way to look at maybe how to do this. So that's where things are at.
Thank you for the update. Penny?
I just wanted to ask or throw out to Tucker, I guess, the amount of time for something like that to actually occur. I mean, as Brooke just pointed out, we've been up there for 8 to 10 years on our home rule petition. I mean, what is a realistic timeline on this?
When you say this, which do you mean?
The statewide tax.
Well, Dylan, so I guess just, sort of technically speaking, I'm going to say our present version of the home rule has probably been up there for about 5 years. And then prior to that, going back 10 or 15 years, there had been an earlier effort at a slightly different version. And then there was a hiatus for a number of years of trying to advance anything. So, I mean, I guess I would say we've really been at trying to push the version we all know for about a 5-year period. I think what Dylan is trying to do with this new proposal is to get it across the finish line. And I don't know that means, I think his plan is to try to put it on to an economic bill that is going, that is in the legislature now. Now, whether that would happen by the end of the session, which is January 5th, probably, I guess I would say unlikely. But I think he's viewing this as a possible, it may be possible in the next session. Having said that, Brooke, alluded to when we first proposed our home rule, Dylan reached out directly to the Mass Association of Realtors to say, hey, I don't quite understand why you guys are opposing this so hard. You guys are about selling and renting houses, and we're talking about, building and creating more housing. Like, this ought to be a win-win. And in the course of that conversation, they basically, said, well, we don't want a new fee. If you want to adjust the land bank fee that you presently have, we're okay with that, but just don't add something new.
So they portend to be about the protection of private property rights is their main driver and justification. Because the funding sources are completely different. One is a fee on the sellers in a transaction, and one is a fee on buyers. What Brooke is talking about is an existing fee on buyers. Why couldn't the two occur concurrently? I mean, they could, right?
Yes.
Because one is not cannibalizing the other. Okay, just a point of clarification, because I think that is there's going to be some resistance from some sectors if there are new fees or perception of new fees rather than a reallocation of existing ones. Just a comment. Thanks.
Thank you, Penny. Brooke?
I also think that this is part of the conversation we need to have. What is attainable, and what does the community want? And so that's my purpose in this. And in an ideal world, the land bank would get on board.
Dave?
Have you had any preliminary discussions with anyone over there, Brooke, through you?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And
Extremely preliminary. Let me leave it that way.
what was the temperature of the room?
Open to conversation. Very
awesome.
Open to conversation.
That's great. That's encouraging.
So,
thank you.
Yeah.
Brooke, I'll just say that I appreciate you, bringing the conversation to the forefront of, everyone's feet for this upcoming town meeting. Yeah, it's a steep hill, and we've all looked at it for a long time. So I appreciate you starting to push the rock up it.
Well, my sense is that we've tried valiantly to find an alternative direction, unsuccessfully so far. So this door has been presented to us in our, meetings at the State House as a more viable option there. It's probably a more challenging option here. And we'll see. We'll see what the voters want to do.
Great. Anything more on the topic Brooke brought up? Seeing none, open it back up to any other new public comment. I wonder if we should plan for our next meeting to have that warrant article as an agenda item for discussion as the board and kind of kick it around. All right.
Our next meeting is
good.
on the 17th, so she will have submitted it by then, right, Brooke?
Mhm.
Great.
Yes, the deadline's the 13th.
So we can look forward to reviewing it then. Seeing no other jumpers at public comment, I'll close that item, move to item number 5, the review and approval of the trust's proposed RFP for SHI eligible housing, workforce housing, and year-round housing. So I'll head over to the packet, I guess.
Yeah, Eleanor, can you screen share that? Or I can if you.
I'm going to go for it, but yeah, I just want you to remember the issues. Let me try.
You're always so good at it.
It's not me. It's something funny with my computer, and I don't know. Holly's nearby. She can maybe help me. Okay, let me find give me 1 second to find the packet. Okay, here we go. Okay. All right, let me get to the right page. Okay, let's go for it. Do you see it?
Yes.
I do.
Yay! Because I can't. You remember when I share something, I can't see anything except. I know. It is. So everybody see
Okay.
it?
Oh,
Yes.
yes.
Okay, now
Tucker,
I have to open my minutes. So just give me a second. I want to make sure you don't see my minutes now. Do you see my minutes now?
No.
Good. Okay, go for it, Tucker.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so just a little bit of background for the board. You all will recall we took a first look at a draft of this, I guess what we're going to call like standing or rolling RFP / application for trust funds. So I think we can, talk about the recent Neighborhood First RFP that went out August 12th, and applications were due, I believe it was October 27th. And in the end, we ended up receiving 4 proposals that we can consider. The review committee for that is going to be meeting tomorrow for the first time for their initial kickoff and again, initial discussion about the proposals and basically the plan for doing the work of reviewing and ultimately perhaps recommending. I can say that the 4 proposals that can be considered include one proposal that would incorporate or is comprised of 5 existing rental units at an in-town location. And then my understanding is that the other 3 proposals basically relate to a duplex or 2-unit project on each of the other 3 parcels. So in total, we're talking about 11 units that have been proposed that can be considered, as, resulting from the last RFP process.
Tucker, just as
Yes.
a matter of clarification, it's 11 units on the second, third, and fourth proposal and 5 on the first proposal.
Is that a statement or a question?
No, that's a question. I was just trying to clarify. You said there's one property that has 5 existing units, and then the other proposal was up to 11 units?
No, I'm sorry. So I have not actually seen the proposals myself yet. The procurement department has been reviewing them all for to basically ensure that they meet the minimum evaluation criteria. But my verbal understanding is that there is the one proposal involving the 5 units, and then 3 separate proposals, each of which is a proposal for 2 units. So a total of 6 units across those 3 proposals. Those other 3 proposals are all from the same proposer.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And those are to be developed units, is my understanding. So I guess the point of that is you might say that we received limited interest in making proposals toward the program. So with a couple of objectives, I guess, first is, maybe this is new territory for folks, and, we're going to have to kind of go back at it a couple of times to see what else is out there, perhaps. Maybe there were some folks who might otherwise have thought about submitting something but weren't aware of it, although we did, I think, do had a fairly strong marketing program. But in any event, in addition to, wanting to, run the net back out there, there also, like, as we know, the housing organizations on the island know the trust, understand how the trust works, and regularly, come to the trust when they have a project to move forward with, and the trust has been supportive of their work. There can be private developers out there as well who would like to aid the effort, but maybe less familiar with how things work at the trust. So in a way, this document also, helps someone who may not already be familiar with how we work. It sort of provides them a roadmap of what we're looking for when they may want to make a submission. So town council is doing a little further refinement of this. I think we spoke at the last meeting how the template we have here is based largely on the Westford application for trust funds, which was developed by Jen Goldson. But we ultimately may need to work a little bit differently due to the nature of our funding. The way we have things structured is largely based on like how the CPC operates. And the CPC, as you all know, actually doesn't make grants. They recommend grants to town meeting, and town meeting approves or doesn't approve those grants. So that's a little nuance that we're working with town council in terms of, how we might need to refine this a little bit further. But more or less, this is, taken our, I'm going to call it past practices and how we view things, and incorporated some of the approach that Westford has had, as well as, what our own CPC has, and marries in elements as well of the RFP that was put out under Neighborhood First. So what our aim is here is to discuss and take comments and subsequent to this meeting, make final revisions such that we would be in position to issue this at the November 18th time frame. These things get issued on Wednesdays through the state system. So one of the main points that we discussed at the last meeting was trying to set up a semi-annual period or periods where we regularly would be taking applications, although we do have a caveat that if someone has a project of a time-sensitive nature that doesn't happen to fall in line with the semi-annual schedule, that they could present that off-cycle. So anyway, that with that said, I would welcome comments or happy to address any particular aspect.
Sorry, I muted. Tucker, thank you. Rima, Flora?
First, Eleanor, can you do that back to one page at a time? Because it's really small now on my screen. Yeah, that makes it easier to read. I have a bunch of stuff, but I think if we just did them one page at a time. First, what do we think about instead of for trust funds, trust funding? Trust funds sounds like, something rich kids get. So funding looked better to me.
Sounds good.
Okay, the other one, under full application, you say for consideration in the summer funding rounds, but then on the next page, it says a spring and fall. So that was confusing to me.
Yes, I think that's a leftover from the one round.
Yeah, I'm sure that a lot of these are going to be leftovers, but if we're going to be voting on it today, I think we kind of need to tighten it up.
On that note, I think, Tucker, we won't be necessarily voting on it today, but more taking input like this, Rima, and then delivering it to town council to finalize for our next meeting, if I understand correctly.
All right, because there was an action item on the agenda.
I think initially we had hoped that to be the case, but there's been some advice from town council that it might take a little work.
Okay, great. Right, so that's all I have on page 1.
Okay, Rima, are you all set for a minute? Can I recognize Brooke?
Yeah.
Okay, Brooke.
Tucker, it says Nantucket Affordable Housing Trust Fund, NAHT. We should just remove the fund.
Penny, I see you
The first
shaking your
paragraph.
head. Do you not want to comment now, Penny?
Me? Oh, I have something, but it's not till page 7.
Okay. I guess we can move to page 2. Does anybody have any comments there?
Yes.
Okay, Rima, floor is yours.
Well, no, it's nothing. It's just December 15th, if that could be in one column. The first where the 15 is down below, but that's just a little, widening of the column thing. So it can all fit on one line. But that's minimal.
Okay, moving to the next page. Rima, Rima, I'm just going to give you the floor until somebody else raises their hand.
Someone else has something on a different on a page. If we're on page 3, map and lot, is that new on Nantucket? Don't we usually say map and parcel?
Same thing.
I know it's the same thing, but it might be confusing to
It's
somebody.
not the same thing. You're absolutely right. It should be map parcel, but you can also have lot number and a plan reference, like a title reference. So they're
Right,
different.
that's registry stuff,
Right.
as
Yeah.
opposed to assessors.
I think I think we edited it to parcel to stay consistent with the assessor's data.
All right. And on page 4, you need an L on project goals. It says there's no L there in the first line.
You're passing the test, Rima.
I always pass a test because I read this stuff. Okay, page 5, in the targeted population section, I'm wondering if we should list sober living as a possibility or if that falls under special needs. Something we had talked about a long time ago.
That's also probably housing with support services, though, if you have sober living.
Okay, all right.
That's a good.
As long as it's covered in there somewhere. Okay, on 6, this is our first.
Oh, Rima, hang on 1 second before we jump pages. Brooke, did you have something else on that page?
Eleanor, would you suggest changing special needs to housing with support services or adding it?
As a former
goes
social
on
worker, I would agree with that.
We have housing with support services.
And special.
Oh, it's right
needs.
down there. Sorry, I was stuck on the first one. Never mind.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
why I'm not a proofreader.
All right. On 6, I think that we should put a little asterisk on our first AMI and then underneath explain that AMI is area median income, because not everybody is familiar with the shortened version of everything. So the first time it's introduced, we should let that be written out.
I have a question on that one. Is there an option not to fill that out, Tucker? In the AMI category for the person making the proposal, maybe it's not up to them to make the determination. Would this, if that was not filled out, would this make this an incomplete application, I guess is the question?
It's a good question. We can make it like not a requirement to fill it out. So you're not disqualified by not, but if you would like to propose, you can.
Right, yeah, I think we may see some proposals that necessarily the seller or developer doesn't have an idea on how they want to designate the units. That's more on us, so I don't want it to inhibit the application in any way. Rima, back to you.
Okay, page 7. Well, the main thing for me is under item 3, you have a comprehensive master plan. It's not comprehensive, it's just a master plan. So that comprehensive just needs to leave. And then you didn't have an asterisk on community need on describing how the project meets these things, you know, as far as a required attachment. I don't know. Can we talk about whether or not we think that community needs should be a required attachment, and whether or not letters of support should be a required thing?
Brooke?
As far as community support, I'm not sure it's necessary to require it, but certainly the lack thereof would be indicative. Is there a way to say not require it, but to indicate that it would be considered favorably if it were included?
I think that's implied. But
I think one of the items on the criterion relates to that in terms of letters of support. So it would be a plus if you had them.
I mean, it's possible that an applicant could have tried and gotten none and still be putting forward an application. So.
And I see, I want to make sure that we make this application available to the single duplex owner
Mm.
that may not be looking at filling a large community need or finding community support. Well,
Okay.
those are larger scale project opportunities. How do we make this inclusive of the individual property owner and not necessarily the developer? Yes, Brooke.
We could set a unit threshold by which it's required. Anything in excess of 10 units or whatever requires these things.
I think that makes a lot of sense. You know, it stays consistent with the concept of neighborhood first and having an eye on density. And so making it more of a public forum conversation to show support.
I like that.
Mr. Dickler, if I can hold you for just a minute and just make sure that all the members have an opportunity on that. Penny?
Yeah, just at the bottom of page 7, that in the italics, it should say subject to appraisal, TO.
Yeah. I knew Penny would find what I couldn't find.
Well, you found a lot I didn't find.
Are there any more board comments? Recognize Mr. Dickler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Howard Dickler. I was a little disappointed by only receiving 4 applications for the first RFP. And in looking at this form, I mean, it's a lot of the things you're requiring are quite technical, and it's framed in the context of a complete project, soup to nuts, and it's well within the capability of a developer to undertake this kind of an application. But I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of somebody who wants to offer property to the trust, and his alternative is to list it with a real estate agent. And that's, you know, they're just not comparable in terms of the effort required. So in some ways, having it be this extensive is a little bit of shooting oneself in the foot. So just a view from an outsider.
Thank you very much. Generate any new comments or thoughts? Brooke?
It makes me wonder whether can we bifurcate this and have 2 different applications? Maybe a separate application for a single unit property.
Dave?
Or,
Oh, sorry, Brooke.
yeah, no,
You good, Brooke?
yeah, all good.
I mean, I think that is a very valid point. I mean, I think that for some people, this is overwhelming. And there could be 2 ways to go about it. And both of them are going to be effort for somebody. I mean, we could also somewhere, you know, let people know that if they need assistance filling this out, that we can make it available to them. I know that easier said than done. And we could also have 2 applications. We could have one with just very basic information, and they could give it to us. And if it looks like it's something that's going to work out, then we get a more detailed application.
Sort of a notice of intent application.
Yeah.
And then how do you work through a complete packet.
Yeah, if it's something that looks like it's viable and interesting to both parties, then we roll up our sleeves and get into the more complex application. Just throwing it out there.
I'm going to come to Rima, then Tucker, then Penny. So Rima, floor is yours.
I think that process is described somewhere in here about just sort of doing a pre-application, almost like the planning board looks at sketch plans and offers comments on them before a whole application comes in. And I think somewhere in here, there was something that described that kind of process. I don't know exactly where, but I kind of remember reading it. Tucker maybe could, confirm or.
You're correct, Rima.
Okay.
Tucker, did you have another note or topic you wanted to?
I'll let Penny speak first.
Okay.
I was just going to say, I think Dave's idea about 2 separate applications makes a lot of sense. And it could be unit-based, 2 or fewer units or 3 or fewer units.
Mhm.
But I completely agree with what Howard said. And your average, this needs to be understandable for a layperson, not just developers. That's
So
it.
at the moment, current zoning allows 3 units per 1 lot. So should we make that the 3 or less as kind of the simple form and then go from there? Brooke?
Yeah, I agree, because that sort of puts you into the single homeowner group as opposed to a development of sorts. And I think maybe what we do on that application is subject to the trust request for further information. That if somebody comes through with something that's a little more complicated than a home with a primary, secondary, and tertiary, has complexities to it, we can ask them for more information.
Yes,
Yeah.
Tucker.
So what I was going to say, I mean, I think Mr. Dickler's point is an excellent one. And I don't know that the unit number is necessarily the delineator we want to have. I mean, take, for example, this 5-unit proposal that we've received under the Neighborhood First RFP that's all on 1 lot. So I think that what I can explore, if it made sense to the group with town council, is the idea that maybe at the front end of the application, you're checking a box effectively of whether you're proposing selling your property, let's say as is, much the way you would be proposing under the Neighborhood First RFP that went out, or you're proposing a development project. So I think it's better to have 1 application, if you will, than 2 for a few different reasons. But we can incorporate a lot of what we put together for the Neighborhood First RFP to give that lane for the person I think that Mr. Dickler was, or Dr. Dickler was describing.
Any comments on that? Dave, Dave, you had something just before Tucker spoke. Did that one leave you or get covered?
No, I mean, I don't think we should, I think we should just have a preliminary application and then a secondary application that follows up after we see. I mean, I think it is important, as Mr. Dickler stated, that we need to, someone can just go to their real estate agent and say, hey, I want to sell this. What do you think it's worth? Okay, will you sell it for me? And that's very easy. I mean, again, as that sale goes on, it gets more complex, but I think it should be that easy for them to come to us as well. You have one basic application that you fill out in the beginning. We get it, we review it, and then from there, the further questions or applications go from there. But I
Mr.
think
Chair,
the
may
first-
I say something?
Yes, Eleanor, go ahead.
I totally understand what everybody's saying about that, but in some instances, you might have someone who has, as I do with the ZBA, for instance, has an attorney helping them. And they're not going to need to do the preliminary application. They're going to have all the wherewithal to do a full-on application, therefore decreasing our need for administrative overhaul and
Mhm.
work and time. I think it would be efficient to have that option out there for those who won't need help. I, as a zoning administrator, often people will come to me and say, I don't know how to do this. It's overwhelming. So I'll help them walk them through it. But most people have attorneys helping them. So you have both. Just want to put that out there.
No, yeah, and I agree. But I think that the original application should be so simple that it's not that much skin off their back.
Allison?
Yeah, I was going to say, I like the idea of going back to, someone said before, even almost just a notice of intent. Maybe it's not so much a first application, but more of a, I'm interested, here's my address, here's my map and parcel, here's what I'm considering. And some people, like you said, Eleanor, may not even think they need to do that because they're ready to fill out this application. But some people might just want to show their interest to see if it's even worth their time if we're interested in their property. Some people aren't going to want to do this entire application, like you said, Dave, if they can just hand their property over to a real estate agent and they do all the upfront work.
Rima?
I think that's pretty much what's described on the first page. There's a pre-application listed first and then the full application, which is the page that's up on the screen right now. I think that kind of covers what everyone's talking about.
Tucker, I don't think you have anything more on that. You just had a big thumbs up.
Yeah, Rima got it. It's,
Okay.
I mean, we give the opportunity for sure. And it's not even like to a form. It's your words, the way you want to do it, one pager. So it couldn't be easier for someone who knows nothing about it.
So on that concept, and here's a simple pre-application, here's my interest. How does one filling out the other affect the timeline for review and or awards based on doing this twice a year? Does that make a difference in?
Well, I would say that, if when we adopt the schedule, it's publicly known what the schedule is. And it really would be a function of, or it would be sort of the responsibility, I guess, of the person who was thinking of proposing to come with a pre-application, at a time point where it would allow them to come in through the regular channels we have prescribed. And again, we do have a caveat in there that if you have something that is of a time-sensitive nature, we can take it up off cycle, but to the greatest extent possible, we'd like to funnel things through these 2 time periods that we're prescribing.
Brooke?
So how do we envision the process by which someone comes with a pre-application? Is it then considered at a public meeting? And then there's a vote to say, we think you should complete the application or don't bother initially? And how often do we consider those pre-applications in this cycle? Or can people come at any point in the year with a pre-application, knowing that they will be then put they would be directed to a certain seasonal cycle from there. I'm just trying to figure out process.
Ema?
Can I just read this because it says it answers all of that? Before pre-application, before completing this application, you may submit a one-page summary of your project at any time to the Nantucket Affordable Housing Trust to determine eligibility for trust funds and to discuss funding priorities. The NAHT will invite you to a meeting to review your pre-application project summary. You may submit your pre-application by email or hard copy to NAHT. So yes, we'll look at it, we'll invite them to a meeting, we'll talk about it, and then they can proceed from there. I think it's pretty clear.
Mhm.
The procedure.
Rima, thank you for the clarification. Tucker, I have a question related on the clarification. If the is the pre-application a public hearing situation, or is it an executive session opportunity prior to the completion of the full application? And this is not to have someone not, be revealing themselves if they choose not to work with the trust and go to a broker or something along those lines. How do we afford that opportunity or position?
Yeah, so I had noted, as you all were talking before, like basically, question to town council, like, can it be an executive session item? Because it does involve real estate, obviously. If the party wanted to not have it be a public, there were elements that were not appropriate to be public at that juncture.
But having said that, as soon as we get to the full application, it is a RFP, public opening, review through procurement process.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and so town council will tell us the answer. They may say the pre-application needs to be public as well. But I don't know, yeah.
I think Mr. Dickler has, go ahead.
Howard Dickler, I have a question. Does putting this RFP in place in any way restrict the trust's ability to act on a parcel such as the Orange Street property or the UMass property, which certainly didn't go through this application process?
So Orange Street would be a great example of the where the trust did not need to go through this particular process in order to move on that particular situation. And there are a couple different elements that come into whether something is deemed to be unique or not, as well as when CPC funds are involved.
Mr. Dickler.
I just want to make sure that the trust doesn't get themselves in a bind and people say, look, you have two different processes. If I'm a little person, I have to go through this application. But if you're a big guy, you can talk to somebody and you get to work with the trust behind closed doors in executive session. And so it's separate but not equal. So I don't want the trust to create something that's going to cause problems.
Nobody
I appreciate
wants
you I appreciate you looking out for us on that. Tucker, I obviously want to take that to the recommendation of town council. Okay, so any more on either the details or the overall process? So seeing none, I think we're probably going to continue this item to the next meeting. Tucker?
I think we got to page 7. Were there any further comments?
Oh, sorry, Rima.
Yeah, page 10. At the top, first line, Town of Nantucket, it says production plan. I think you want to say the housing production plan. And then under neighborhood context, design and sustainability, the first bullet item, create and preserve affordable housing that is consistent with the density. I think that kind of reads as sameness. Something might not be the same as everything in the rest of the neighborhood. Maybe that language should say that is, quote, appropriate for the density scale. So people, you know, if we want to put something that's a little different from the whole neighborhood, like, you know, maybe a small apartment building, somebody can say, well, you know, it's not exactly the same. Consistency just to me reads as sameness. So I think appropriate might give us a little more leeway there. And that is all I had.
Thank you.
Can I stop sharing? Or do you need to see it still?
I think we're okay, Eleanor.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, any more on that? I think we're all done for Tucker with his marching orders. We'll carry that to the next meeting. So that ends today's discussion on item 5. If we go to item 6, other business, the next meeting being the first item. Will we have a quorum on November 17th at 1? Kind of our regularly scheduled Tuesday. Any big conflict? Getting a lot of affirmative head shaking, so that's good. Does anyone have any other business to bring to the floor? Seeing none, we'll close that. Board comments, item number 7. Anybody on the board have any comments to make? Seeing none, we'll move that. Item number 8, we will look for a motion. Either Penny or Brooke. Two of you are so well versed at this.
I think that Brooke should do it today.
Okay.
Thanks, Penny. I appreciate that.
I'll second it.
So let me see if I get this right. I move to close the open session of the Nantucket Affordable Housing Trust to move into executive session, not to return to open session for the purpose of considering the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property where an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the public body, period.
Second.
Second from Penny Dye by roll call. Allison Mitchell,
Aye.
Dave Iverson,
Aye.
Brooke Moore,
Aye.
Rima Sherry,
Aye.
Penny Dye,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Hi.
and Brian Sullivan. Aye. Great. So we'll regroup momentarily on at 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Okay, so a quick 5-minute break.
2:15.
See you then. Thank you, everybody.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Aye.